I don't understand my fiduciary duty.
Yeah. In the meeting of the 9th, Mr. Tsotsi, you say to the board, I have been summoned by the President. Now, this is from the transcript of that meeting.
Yes.
I've been summoned by the President. And you say 3 times. And the most recently was yesterday. Now, this is the 9th. You are referring to yesterday being the 8th of March, where he has finally made up his mind about what he wants to do about the situation of Eskom. Both Minister and I have been summoned by the President separately on several occasions where he has expressed his view about the situation that he finds at Eskom. These are the transcript of the audio recording of 9 March 2015.
Yes.
I was intrigued by summoned 3 times. You and the Minister summoned separately by the President, because we don't see that in your affidavit. Are you able to explain to the chairperson why?
Why that statement is not in my affidavit?
No, why is 3 times?
Oh.
And whether in fact you had been summoned 3 times by the President.
No, Chairman, this goes back quite a long way, even during Mr. Kigaba's term of office. On the occasions when the President wanted to understand what's happening at Eskom, he would ask to see the Minister, and the Minister would ask me to accompany him. And this happened a few times. Over a period of maybe over 2 years maybe. So, sort of intermittently, there was no particular pattern. It was just the last one being on this occasion.
So is your explanation to the chairperson that in respect of this particular issue, the inquiry and the stepping aside of the executives, the summoning of you by the President happened 3 times?
No. I was meaning that the concern that the President has expressed about the situation at Eskom had been raised by him in my presence, in the presence of the Minister as well, before. But there was no discussion about an inquiry, there was no discussion about suspensions or anything like that. It was just, an opportunity for him to express his concern about the situation in the company.
Did you know that he had in fact spoken to the Minister separately about the situation at Eskom?
No, I didn't know. I did not mean in all those occasions that he had spoken separately to the Minister.
Sorry, just repeat that.
I did not mean, like I said, some of the occasions I was with the Minister when the President raised the issues.
But let's confine ourselves to the issue here, because you say the last of the 3 occasions was last night.
Yes.
I'm sure you would have met with the President many other times, not only 3 times at the time you were the chairperson of the board. But it seems to me that the statement is specific to the issue you are bringing to the board. I'm bringing this before you. Yes. He's now made up his mind about what he wants to do. That's what you added.
Yes.
Yes. So, was this raised with you on 3 different occasions? And you say the Minister has also been summoned separately by the President. You are referring to this inquiry?
No, I'm referring to the concern that the President had about the performance of the business. When I say he's finally made up his mind, I'm referring now to the attitude he has taken of an inquiry and of the action that he's talking about.
Yeah. Could you please address the chairperson, because what it happens here is the impression again, it brings back to memory that impression that there seems to be a consistent effort by somebody outside of Eskom, whether even in government, to control what the board in fact is supposed to be doing. They're controlling the board as opposed to the board itself controlling the affairs of Eskom. Your comment on that?
Chair, that could be the case. I mean, it's quite common that you hear from, the shareholder representative the things that they think should happen in the organization. It happens quite a lot with the SOCs anyway. And I think this is something that I noticed that you're very concerned with because, of the need for the boards to be independent. But there's undoubtedly quite a lot of interference. You may construe it as political interference, but it happens. Yes, it happens quite a lot. Mm. Yes.
So is that an acknowledgement that it happened here? When we talk about the inquiry, the suspension of the
in essence, yes, it is in essence a reflection of political authority, engaging,
bringing its muscles to bear on an SOE.
Yes. Oh yes.
Actually, I think there are many people who believe that the failures that we see in a number of SOEs are precisely because government or politicians continue to interfere in how those SOEs are run. If the politicians were to leave the boards and managers of SOEs to do their job properly, and if they were to make sure that the people who are appointed to the boards and the people who are appointed to senior positions in the SOEs are people who have the expertise and the independence, who have integrity, and leave them alone to run these as businesses, as they would run a business. A lot of these SOEs would perform very well.
Chairman, that is the SOE, the Eskom I found in 1995 when I joined the company. The company was making its own decisions and simply had a normal shareholder liaison relationship. But even the chairman made it very clear that he will not brook any interference by government. And I mean, for those early years since the dawn of democracy, certainly as far as Eskom is concerned, that was the case, and the company was extremely efficient. It was a world-class institution.
Yeah, well, I think you may have been one of the witnesses, but there have been other witnesses who made it quite clear that in the first years of our democracy, and for quite some time after that, Eskom was the envy of other similar entities worldwide.
Yes.
It was held in high regard. That is no more.
Yes.
And a lot of people will say it's because politicians interfere in the affairs of these SOEs. And largely they don't allow the managers and the boards to run the businesses of the SOEs the way they consider appropriate. And of course, getting the people with the right skills, right experience, integrity and independence is critical, Yeah. And they are all, so many of the SOEs all on the verge of going under.
Yes, correct.
You know, you talk of SAA, you talk of ESCOM, you talk of PRASA, you talk of Denel. Even Denel, I had evidence that once upon a time, Denel was also highly regarded internationally. Yeah. Mr. Slager.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Tsotsi, a little bit on that meeting, and I'm moving on. There is Mr. Jabu Maswanganyi.
Yes.
Mr. Linnell has touched on an aspect which we were not aware of before. That he, amongst other things, he assisted in drafting the letter that you wrote to the minister saying, dissolve this board. 1, 2, actively in that meeting, according to Mr. Linnell, participated actively providing documentation to Mr. Linnell in regard to issues at ESCOM. But all Mr. Linnell says unverified, unidentified sources. But he's actively involved. According to Mr. Linnell, Jabu Maswanganyi may have been the one who told him, and I'm giving you all this thing to you in no particular order. But I want to show you the level of his involvement. That he's not a once-off figure, according to Mr. Linnell. He might be the person who told Mr. Linnell, when Mr. Linnell received an email saying, you are no longer needed, on the 17th of March, that 6 days after the 11th of March, some 8 days after your meeting at the President's place on the 8th of March. So it's fairly soon, fairly close to the beginning of the events. That after he received that email, he connected the email to the meeting he said he learned took place on the 16th of March 2015, the evening of the 16th of March, a secret meeting between some board members and some suspended executives. Let's first deal with Jabu, Mr. Jabu Maswanganyi. Here he has a hand in the drafting of a letter ultimately you put together to the minister. And this meeting of 16 March is referenced in that letter. We've shown you that letter. Who is Mr. Maswanganyi?
Chair, I must first of all indicate that the issue of my not recalling Jabu really bothered me for quite a while.
Yes, maybe, Mr. Slager, you started too far back, because Mr. Tsotsi did testify about Mr. Maswanganyi last time. He said he knows him quite well, but he said he did not remember him as having been present at the Durban meeting, and he said he thought he would have remembered if Mr. Maswanganyi had been in that meeting. That was your evidence, is that correct?
Exactly that, Chair. Exactly
that. So I'm just saying you started too far back. You should...
no, but it's fine, Chair. It's fine, because there's some point I wish to make around exactly that.
Yes.
Like I say, it bothered me that I couldn't remember him. So I decided, look, why don't I just ask Jabu if he was there? So I called him and I asked him, and he said yes, he had been at the presidency at the same time we were there.
Oh.
For whatever he had been there for. And as I said to him, look, it's funny that I didn't remember your being there.
But did he admit that he was at the meeting?
Now, what he says is he had an encounter with Nick and myself in the anteroom, so to speak, in the wherever we waited. To get
in the passages, or what?
To get into the meeting. But he says he did not participate in the meeting with the president. Look, this is what I recollect.
Well,
myself.
you know, Mr. Linnell said something which you didn't say. not be necessary because you would have sought to conceal it, but it's something that I was going to ask you. Mr. Linnell said, in effect, there were two meetings in Durban. He said the first meeting did not involve the former president. He said it was himself, Mr. Tumieni, yourself, and he said, and Mr. Maswangai. And he said, he indicated what Mr. Maswangai's contribution was, mainly with documents and so on at that meeting. But he said later on, you were asked to move to another meeting, which is the room where the president joined you. And he said you must have waited for about 5 minutes in that other room, and then the former president came in. I asked him whether everybody who had been in the earlier meeting moved to the other room, and I think he said yes. I don't know if he made, yeah, I remember I asked him whether Mr. Mieni's son, Talente, had also moved, and he said yes, if I recall correctly.
Yes, Chair.
And I think we asked him about Mr. Maswangai as well, and I think he said yes.
Yes.
So one, I want to check with you whether you remember the position as having been that there were like two meetings or not.
Yes, Chair, that's definitely correct.
Okay.
We had a session before we met the president where Dudu Mieni was outlining the issues. And then we moved into the sitting
Another room, yeah.
Yes, where then the president came in to join the meeting.
Okay, so I just wanted to
Yes.
indicate that, but also to say that according to Mr. Linnell, everybody who had been in the first meeting moved into this into the second meeting. Yeah. But you are right. It's funny that you wouldn't remember
Yes, it's strange.
having seen somebody that you know so well.
Yes, very strange.
But he denies having taken part in the meeting.
Yeah, he
Mr.
said no, he
Maswangai.
didn't participate in the main meeting with the president.
Or he denied participating in the meeting where the president
Where the
was.
president was present. Yes.
But the other
But
meeting.
yes, he was there. He said.
Oh, he admits that he was
Yes.
there. Oh, okay.
No,
well,
he admits he was in that part.
Well, it may well be that Mr. Linnell might not have been emphatic about his presence in the second meeting. I'm not sure. But at least if Mr. Maswangai admits that he took part in the first meeting, that resolves quite something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
Actually, it might not matter whether he was
That's right.
in the second meeting or not.
Yeah. My recollection of Mr. Linnell is that he did not speak in the meeting with the president.
Yes, I
That
think
he
you're
didn't
right.
speak.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
Mr. Jabu Masonga.
Yeah, but in the end,
It doesn't matter.
whether he spoke or he didn't speak, or
Yeah.
I think what is important is that he admits having been in the first meeting.
Yes.
That resolves quite a large portion.
Maybe I was very uptight, Chairman, so maybe I didn't notice he was in the second meeting.
Sorry?
I said maybe I was very uptight, and I didn't notice that he was in the second meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, no, Mr. Linnell did say you were very uncomfortable
Yeah,
in the meeting.
Yes, yeah. Mr. Linnell said that. He said you seemed an unwilling participant in the meeting.
yes.
Yeah. But of course, according to Ms. Mieni, one would not have expected you to look like an unwilling participant because this was a meeting that you had wanted.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Mieni, of course, also says her son wasn't there.
No, Chair, the son was there. Yes.
Mr. Tsotsi, I've got a few points, then I'm over.
Have you got anything to say
I-
about Ms. Mieni's version that there was no meeting with the president?
Chairman, that's patently false. That's putting it as mildly as I can. It's patently false. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. There is no particular order to this point, Mr. Tsotsi. These are just versions we get from the Commission, from the other witnesses. We understand from the other witnesses, I think Dr. Ngubane in particular, to some extent Mrs. Venita Klein, that you had made, when you presented the report, you made allegations of misdemeanors against the 4 executives. So you told the board, these people must be suspended, and these are the reasons why they should be suspended.
And the reasons you gave in regard to each one, and I think at least the 3, the reasons you gave related to allegations of misconduct.
Chairman, what happened was that Nick, and in preparing whatever he wanted to present, apparently had somehow got hold of some information regarding whatever might have been going on with each of those people. I'm not sure exactly where he got it from. I really didn't even ask him. And what happened was, when I was making the point, I was saying, Nick had said to me, there are some issues around these people. And I said, well, look, if there are issues around them, you can raise them. It's not an issue. But the understanding is that these people are not in the position we are wanting to put them in because of them being, having committed some misdemeanors. That's not part of what the intention is. So I think at some point I gave over to Nick, and I think Nick must have said something about those things. I don't believe that or if I said them myself, it would have been stuff which I got from him.
Well, you see, that's an important issue that you need to deal with. Because it starts off with, I think, both Dr. Ngubane and maybe Ms. Klein as well, saying that actually you were pushing for the suspension of the executives. I hope I'm not misrepresenting anything, but that's my recollection, certainly from Dr. Ngubane's evidence, that they were questioning you. I don't know whether it's on his version, that is what happened on the 9th, but at a certain stage, either on the 9th or the 11th, I think he portrays you as somebody who was pushing for the suspensions. And my impression was that bringing in these allegations of misconduct against them may have been misunderstood by them as a way of pushing for their suspension. Now that is strange when one has regard to the fact that you said when you gave evidence here at the Durban meeting, when this idea of the suspension of executives was raised, you were opposed to it, at least initially. You were opposed to it. And Mr. Linnell has confirmed that you were opposed to it, the idea of the suspension of the executives. So that is one. But then secondly, I would say it's strange as to why Mr. Linnell would go and seek to dig allegations of misconduct against these executives in circumstances where he knew that at the Durban meeting, everybody was agreed that the suspensions were not going to be based on allegations of misconduct. 3, even if he did that for a reason that we don't know, it seems to me that that it's strange if you even entertain them, whatever they are, particularly coming from him. He's not an ESCOM person.
Yes.
He has been brought from outside. He was at the Durban meeting where it was made quite clear that wrongdoing is not the basis of the suspension of these executives. Yes. So why is he digging up things? I would have expected your attitude if he told you about such, to say, but that has got nothing to do with the suspensions, you know that. So why are you bringing them in? What's the relevance?
Yes.
You see?
Yes.
So now if he told you about them and you went ahead and entertained them and shared these allegations with the board, that seems strange to me to say. Why are you doing that? Because you know that the suspensions are not based on allegations of wrongdoing. So what's the relevance of telling the board about these allegations?
Yes, that's correct, Chairman. That is why I'm a little surprised, because first of all, on the meeting of the 9th, there was no discussion about suspensions. Yeah. I think some witnesses have, or maybe I think Mr. Linnell might have.
No, it's Dr. Ngubane. It's Dr. Ngubane, Chair, who said Mr. Tsotsi mentioned misdemeanors and suspensions on the 9th.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I sought to put.
That's helpful. Yeah.
Sorry, I sought to put to him that the audio doesn't reflect that. Yes. I don't want to help you, Mr. Tsotsi, but yes, the recording of the meeting doesn't reflect that.
Yes.
Yeah, Chairman, it also, to me, smacks of some agenda of some kind. I mean, why would someone say that I discussed these issues on the 9th when, there's evidence that I never raised any issue about suspensions on the 9th? And I think the meeting of the 11th, any such discussion about whatever the people were supposed to have done would only have come out, I think, at the time when Nick was being introduced. I can't remember very well. That could have, but that discussion did not persist in the meeting.
Yeah.
Because it was not the purpose of what we wanted to do. I don't even remember whether Nick actually stated that as a result, I don't even remember what some of these so-called misdemeanors are. So I think
last time you did testify about them, if I'm not mistaken. With regard to Mr. Koko, I know what the allegations.
Yeah.
Or was it another witness?
It was Dr. Ngubane and Ms. Klein.
Oh,
they were trying to recall. They were trying to recall what were the allegations, and Chair, one allegation against Mr. Koko, Mr. Tsotsi, was in relation to sexual escapade captured on a CCTV at the car parking lot.
Yes.
The one regarding the FD, the financial director, it was about her allegedly interfering with tenderers during a bidding process.
Or talking to service providers.
That's right.
Something like that.
That was put to bed as far as I know.
Well, she has testified that you investigated that.
Yes.
She asked that it be investigated. You investigated and you came back to her and said the allegations were baseless. And
exactly, yes.
But Dr. Ngubane, I think, mentioned that was the allegation against her, as mentioned at the meeting.
So I'm just a little bit mystified as to how it is that I could have been pushing for the suspensions to happen when I was in effect opposed to the suspension.
Well, Mr. Selega, you might have a fresher memory of what Dr. Ngubane said, but I seem to think that he said it was Mr. Tsotsi was pushing for the suspensions, and I got the impression that he was saying some of the board members were not happy with that. I think that part, at least which he says was on the 9th. I think certainly on the 9th he says Mr. Tsotsi was pushing for the suspensions and the board members were against this.
Yes. Your recollection is correct, Chair.
Yes.
That's exactly what Dr. Ngubane testified.
Yes, but what you have said is the audio
Yes.
recordings of the meeting of the 9th
Yes.
does not support what Dr. Ngubane is saying.
Correct, Chair.
Okay, so and you will put that to him when he comes back.
Correct, Chair.
But I thought that, I may be mistaken, I thought that when I read the transcript of the meetings of the 11th, I thought I also did come across parts which seemed, sometimes you can't be sure who is talking, but I thought I came across parts which seemed to reflect that the chairperson, who I thought would have been you, was talking about these allegations of misdemeanors and so on. Mr. Selega, is my memory?
Mr. Tsotsi, you will recall there's one where there's a to and fro about whether the FD should be suspended. And Mr. Tsotsi says, no, the FD's position is different. Somebody says, it's not different, Chair. And they're asking, but what is wrong with the FD? There's a male voice, which we are seeking to identify there, which says the FD, there is an allegation that the FD met with bidders during a tender process. And Mr. Tsotsi says, oh, was that reported? Another person also asked, Mr. Baloy, in fact, Mr. Baloy, asked whether was that reported. You did ask the same similar question. And I can't recall what was the answer going forward. That's the only time, according to my recollection, I see somebody seeking to motivate for the suspension of the executive along the lines of misdemeanor allegations.
Yes. So your recollection is Mr. Tsotsi doesn't get involved in talking about the allegations of misconduct during the meetings of the 11th.
No.
To the extent that anybody might have mentioned them, it would not have been him, on your recollection.
My recollection is
Okay,
not.
no, that's fine. So I may be mistaken, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Then maybe it might have been Mr. Linnell in one or other meeting, because I do know that there is somewhere where somebody mentions, talks about them. Or unless I think I'm talking about what was in the transcripts, but actually it's what was in the memoranda or correspondence that Mr. Linnell prepared,
Correct.
which was which had that, because in that part also I remember his correspondence, whether it was a memo or emails. There's a document where he goes to town about these allegations.
Correct.
Yes.
He
Yeah.
does. He certainly does, and I think he alludes to them when he's with the PNG. He alludes to them, but doesn't specifically deal with them.
But also, it's just that one, a witness comes and goes, you remember afterwards what you should have asked. Because one should have asked where he was getting them from.
I think I did ask the question, how the charges came about. My impression is he was relying on what was given to him by
Maswanganyi.
Mr. Jabu Maswanganyi.
Oh, yeah.
Those unverified, unidentified.
But also it's strange. Why would you want to take those allegations and bring them to the board meeting, bring them to Mr. Tsotsi, when he knew that the meetings had nothing to do with allegations of wrongdoing and the suspensions had nothing to do with them? Why was he doing that?
No, that's correct. Because his rationale, remember, his principle was, he considered that I would consider key areas of business that the inquiry would focus on, and also whether anyone in particular in those areas may have a propensity to interfere or have such a presence as to create perception of potentially impeding the investigation. And he was saying, as a matter of life, and he was saying to you, Chair, it doesn't happen in life. When you have these people, they will interfere with the subordinates. And he gave this analogy of two bankers who rob a bank, and if the police find the other one, you know it can only be your colleague. So his rationale is one thing. What he actually went and did is another. But then the board still decided this is not about wrongdoing.
Okay, so maybe he sought to rely on those to say these people have a propensity to misconduct themselves, so there is a good chance they will interfere with the investigation. Okay, all right.
When Ms. Klein said there was no shred of evidence that they had interfered with previous investigation. But Mr. Tsotsi, that's what has been said about you.
Yes.
That you motivated, you gave allegations of misdemeanors as the reasons why. And they say the four on the 9th of March, that you said the four should be suspended.
Chairman, one of the things that would have been, I think, disrespectful to those executives who are concerned would have been to talk about them being suspended in their presence, in a meeting.
Oh, yes.
Quite honestly, they were sitting there. Mr. Mutuna was sitting there. Ms. Mulifa was sitting there. How on earth would you, in a meeting of that nature, start barraging them with suspension?
Say, I've just come from Durban, and the president said, must have an inquiry, and these must be suspended.
Exactly. It doesn't.
Ms. Molefe did say exactly this, Chairperson.
Yeah.
Denying, because we also put it to her.
Yeah.
Did you, Mr. Tsotsi, say to them, there's an inquiry and the suspension of the executives? She said the suspension was not mentioned.
Yes, of course.
And she referred us to the proposal that had their names
Yes,
in
the
them.
memorandum, yeah.
And she was saying, how could we sign a resolution
Exactly.
to suspend ourselves?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
But, Mr. Tsotsi,
We are 10 to 3.
yes, I'm going to... Yeah. Mr. Tsotsi, Mr. Baloyi was opposed throughout
Yes.
to these suspensions. And he asked about the urgency. What is the urgency about? Where is the report you were talking about of background information or background research? And in regard to the issue of the urgency, you were heard in the audio. Shall I say, giving him a tonguelish. And you were saying, if you don't realize the urgency of this matter, then you are not supposed to be a member of the board. You recall that?
Yes, I recall this.
And he was opposed to this right to the very end of the P&G meeting,
Yes.
and he still requested that report. And Dr. Ngubane also says to him dismissively, we don't have this report. There may be a report existing somewhere, but that's not our report. We have taken this decision, it is our own decision.
Yes.
And I'm referring to it because I think he was red flagged. I think he was red flagged. The next thing is, Mr. Tsotsi, you are already out, but he raises concerns, he testified here to some extent, not in so many words, but he's testified about the T-Systems contract. You may not know about it. the T-Systems contract, which kept on being extended and extended, he deals with it in his affidavit, and he was querying why a contract of an IT, it was an IT contract, had reached some, what was the amount?
5 billion, right?
Yeah, 5.2 billion rand. When it didn't, the audit and risk had made queries on it, negotiations on the price. The issue could be dealt with by the executive committee, but the board tender committee decided to decide on the matter, and that board tender committee was chaired by Dr. Ngubane. But you wouldn't know about it. Because
Not
this
that
is,
specific aspect, but I do know about the very dubious issues that occurred around this T-Systems contract. This contract came up for renewal, and everybody put in their bids who were interested, including T-Systems. And at some point, I get to hear that T-Systems did not qualify. So they were taken out of the running. And I believe, this is what I'm being told now, because I wouldn't get involved in these issues, but I was told that the contract and the bidders who were under consideration for the contract, there was some negotiation that was going on already to see which one should be selected. And all of a sudden, the whole process collapsed. And then a proposal came to say, look, we have to start this thing from scratch, but in the meantime, let's extend T-Systems' contract. Now, this is, by the time we're dealing with what Mr. Slika is talking about, it's 9 months since the beginning of the appointment of T-Systems. So that whole IT contract had some very funny behavior that was associated with it. I just thought I'd mention that because I was aware of it from the onset.
and he says that when he made inquiries with Dr. Ngubane shouted at him.
Yes. Chairman, I must apologize, though rather belatedly, to Norman. He's a very pleasant person. I guess I got very impatient with him for whatever reason. But it is true what evidence leader is saying about him having been opposed to the contract. He was particularly concerned about the pace at which things were happening. And I have a great deal of sympathy for that view, because I had a particular problem myself with the suspensions. So I understood where he was coming from in terms of his objections. And when I spoke to him much later, after he himself had been removed from ESCOM, he recalled that his objection to the process that was then going on at the time, he believes must have had something to do with the way the board turned on him. So yes, I do recall that.
Yeah.
Well, because both the way in which the board acted towards you to remove you, and the way in which it seems to have acted towards him to remove you, is strange. There is a level of intolerance that is like unheard of. You have just begun to work with everybody because you are new. Let's assume that the chairperson has made some mistake. But to then really say, let's charge him, and of course one can look at the charges that were used, remove him, then here is another board member, something has happened and suddenly he must be removed. He gets removed. It's all very suspicious, to say the least. It's not the way you would expect board members to behave.
Chairman, things just seem to take a completely different turn after that alleged meeting of this, that night meeting, or the secret meeting.
Yes.
Of the 16th.
Mm.
And my subsequent letter in regard to that meeting to the minister, I think must have unsettled some people. And they acted very quickly to turn the gun on me.
It's all very, very strange. It's all very, very strange. It's not the way you would expect a board to act. In fact, it's not even the way you'd expect a political party to act, politicians to act. The speed with which they sought to remove the chairperson, the speed with which they sought to remove Mr. Baloyi.
Yes.
It's very strange. It calls for some explanation to say what was going on.
Yes.
And Mr. Tsotsi, tell the chairperson a little bit about this meeting. We've heard about, we see it in Mr. Linnell's affidavit, that there was a secret meeting. He linked his emails, the email he received about you are no longer needed. And we've asked him, who were some board members, who were some suspended executives who met that evening in a secret meeting on the 16th of March, 2015. Can you enlighten us on that?
Chairman, I myself, at the time when this meeting took place, I had no idea until the following day, whereupon I was told by Nick that there had been this meeting, and that he believes that this meeting was in fact a decision to terminate his involvement in the process, and that it was working against the decisions that the board had taken. So he then volunteered to draft a letter to the minister from me, indicating that there was this allegation of this meeting, and this would have been in contravention of what the board had wanted to do, and that there was some.
Mr. Tsotsi, may I intervene? Do you know who were some board members and some suspended executives who had that meeting?
Well, I asked, at the time I asked Nick, he didn't know, he was not aware who were in that meeting. But I subsequently asked Jabu, because apparently Nick had worked with Jabu to draw up this letter.
The letter?
Yes.
Mm.
And Jabu indicated that there was, Romeo Khumalo was there.
He knew about the meeting having taken place.
He knew that the meeting had taken place.
Yes.
And he mentioned Romeo Khumalo.
Yes.
He also mentioned Zetem Khoza.
Yes.
And then I asked which executives were in that meeting, or suspended executives. That he didn't know.
Okay.
So
okay.
I only heard of these two names having been present at that meeting.
Did you establish whether he was there himself?
No, he says he got it from his sources, so I presume that,
Okay,
he was not there.
okay. I'm sorry, we'll have to stop
We
here.
have to stop here, Chair.
I know you haven't finished. Mr. Tsotsi, I apologize that we are not able to finish with your evidence when you have come back for the third time. I apologize. We'll have to ask you to come back again. I hope it will be for the last time, but that will be arranged. So I apologize. We have to stop now. I had hoped we would stop at 2:00, but the issues that need to be covered are important and they are not few. So arrangements will be made. I apologize.
No, I understand.
Yes.
My invoice will follow, Chairman. My invoice will follow shortly.
I thought that you would have sent your invoice to the evidence leader.
That's a good idea.
Chair.
I don't know how long you were going to still be, but I think we have to stop. You'll have to continue on some other day. But it should be, there is no reason why it should not be one of the mornings or one of the afternoons in the next 2 weeks. There is no reason why there can't be a day where, because probably you won't need more than an hour or two.
No,
or
shorter
even
than
less.
that.
Yeah, shorter than that.
I literally have 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5 questions, versions to put to you.
Yeah, I know, but sometimes I come in myself. And,
I know.
Yeah. So, but we certainly shouldn't need more than an hour, so we could start
Yes.
at 9 o'clock, by 10 he's
Yes.
done, or we could ask him to come at 4, by 5 he's done, or
Yes.
come at 5, by 6 is done. So you can explore that with him, and then we
Yes.
can take it from there.
Indeed, Chair.
Okay, is that fine, Mr. Tsotsi?
Yes, Chair.
That should be fine.
Yes,
Okay.
Chair.
All right, let us stop here then. On Monday, the commission will start at 2, and not at 10, and I'll hear Mr. Msebenzi's one as evidence. We adjourn.
Yes, yes.